We finished going through the very first essential skill, exercise faith, which is based on the part of the story, Sowing Seeds. Now let's go over the second part of the story of how to get things done. So let's read the full story again, since this is the story we want to remember. So number 1, sowing seeds. A farmer went out to plant some seeds. Number 2, hardened ground. Some seeds fell on hardened ground, but the birds came and ate them up. Number 3, shallow roots. Some seeds fell on rocky ground. Because there wasn't much soil, the plants immediately sprung up. The sun came out and scorched the plants, but because the plants had no deep roots, it withered and died. Number 4, among thorns. Some seeds fell among thorns. The thorns grew up and choked the plants, so they produced no fruit. And number 5, finally, some seeds fell on good soil and produced 30 times, 60 times, and even 100 times what was sown. So the second part of the story says this. Some seeds fell on hardened ground, but the birds came and ate them up. I call this part of the story hardened ground. Now the birds are actually an after the fact part of the story. The root issue here is the hardened ground. It's because of the hardened ground that the bird came and ate the seeds up. Now let me start by saying this. Everything you do or set out to accomplish in life comes down to just one thing. It's change. Change. When you talk about productivity, making progress, or getting things done, the work you do is actually just making lots of changes. You change the dirty dishes into clean dishes. You change a piece of wood into a fancy guitar. You change a child's misbehaviors into good behaviors. You change your business into a better business. The work you do is just making lots of changes. Now there's a saying that everything is hard before it's easy. It's because change always starts with a piece of hardened ground, like in the story. Sometimes what we want to do is hard because we've never done it before. Other times it's hard because of a very old habit you're trying to change. Most of the time, it's hard simply because we can't get a handle on what needs to change. We see it, but we don't perceive it. We hear it, but we don't understand it. The change just seems too big or too difficult for our minds to grasp or comprehend. In other words, for whatever reason, it seems too hard to make the change. So I'm here to tell you that the hard ground doesn't have to be so hard. There's actually a very easy way to make any hard ground softer. Got any ideas? Well, to soften a hard ground, you simply break it down. You break it down into many smaller pieces. In other words, whenever you encounter something that feels too hard to do, you break it down into many smaller and smaller tasks until it feels easy to do. That's it. The second essential skill to getting things done is, when hard, break it down, which is based on the second part of the story, hardened ground. You know, they say mountains cannot be moved. In fact, the adversary would love you to make your mountain much bigger and harder than what it truly is. But you're not just moving a mountain. You're just moving a mountain one shovel at a time. Take it one small step at a time. Work on one small task at a time. Focus on one small thing at a time. When it's hard, break it down. This you can do. There's a productivity movement out there that says to quit trying to strive for absolute perfection. It's because you will never reach perfection and end up getting frustrated over it. There's even a saying, perfection is the enemy of progress. I'm here to tell you to set your visions, dreams, and goals big. Raise the bar super high and aim for perfection. It's because if you settle for less, then you will only get less. You will never achieve or accomplish more than what you're believing for, what you put your faith towards. But in your day-to-day life, think small. Take it one small step at a time. Work on one small task at a time. Focus on one small thing at a time. It's like a puzzle. You only focus on one piece of the puzzle at a time. The same is true for your milestones along the way. For example, if you want to run a full 26-mile marathon, start with a shorter 5K marathon. If you want to publish a best-selling book, start with a small book you can share online. If you want a big mansion, start with a normal-sized house. If you want to be a CEO of a big company, start by leading a small group. In other words, you're taking your perfect dreams, visions, and goals one step at a time. This you can do. Perfection is not the enemy of progress. Quitting is. Remember, the adversary wants you to quit. So as you dig deeper, you learn that it's the many smaller tasks that eventually create or accelerate into something very important: momentum. Momentum is that invisible force that will help you to keep moving forward. You will also learn to develop habits that create many small improvements, which is a positive direction. And you will learn to avoid procrastination, which is kind of like death by 1,000 small cuts, which is a negative direction. When hard, break it down is a powerful strategy for both positive and negative directions. You just have to make sure you choose the right direction. To conclude this introduction, don't lose sight of the big picture. You're still exercising faith. You're believing for big things. But whenever it feels hard to do, simply break your task down until it becomes easy to do. There's a quote by Vincent van Gogh, the artist, that says, "Great things are not done by impulse, but by a series of small things brought together." Great things are not done by impulse, but by a series of small things brought together. It means that one day, with the many small tasks you do, when combined together, will look very different. It will look like you've achieved or accomplished something big. Many times you won't even notice it in the short term, but when you give it some time and step back a little, you can see you've achieved or accomplished something big. The first of the 5 perfect progress skills you learned was exercise faith. The second skill to learn here is when hard, break it down. Again, when hard, break it down. Keep breaking it down until it feels easy. Be encouraged, stay fruitful, and stay productive. Thanks, guys. See you in the next lesson.